The reason Nazis fled after the war is straightforward. Germany was defeated, its leadership was dead or captured, and the scale of what the regime had done was being documented in horrifying detail. The war crimes were enormous in scope. The systematic murder of 6 million Jewish people in the Holocaust, the killing of millions more across occupied Europe, the use of forced labor, the murder of prisoners of war, and the deliberate destruction of civilian populations. The Nuremberg trials had already begun prosecuting senior Nazi figures by late 1945, and more trials were coming. Anyone with a meaningful role in the regime knew that if they were caught, they would likely face execution or life imprisonment. The motivation to disappear was not complicated. The question was where to go. By 1945, the options were narrower than they might appear. Europe was obviously impossible. It was divided between Allied and Soviet occupation zones, crawling with investigators, and every border was being watched. To the east lay the Soviet Union and European colonial territories, where a former Nazi could expect no sympathy. Africa was largely divided between British, French, and other European colonial powers. To the north and west lay the United States, Canada, and Britain. That left South America as the only place that could provide cover. Several South American countries accepted Nazi refugees. Paraguay, Chile, and Brazil all took in significant numbers. But Argentina became the primary destination, not by accident, but because a specific combination of factors made it more welcoming than anywhere else on the continent. The single most important factor was the man at the top. Argentina's president from 1946 onward was Juan Perón, who had served in the Italian military in the late 1930s and openly admired the fascist regimes of Mussolini and Hitler. He had watched the European fascist movements closely, absorbed their ideology, and maintained sympathies toward Germany even as the war ended in Allied victory. Under Perón, Argentina's doors were not merely open to Nazi refugees, they were actively pushed open. Perón also saw practical value in the arrivals, beyond ideology. Argentina was industrializing rapidly and had ambitions for military and technological development. Former German engineers, weapons designers, rocket scientists and military specialists represented exactly the kind of knowledge Perón wanted to acquire. Argentina quietly recruited former Nazi technicians to work on aircraft development, armaments, and industrial projects, treating them the same way larger powers were treating similar figures elsewhere. Because exactly the same calculation was being made simultaneously by the two largest powers in the world. The United States ran a program called Operation Paperclip, which brought over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians into the country after the war, deliberately recruiting people whose Nazi Party membership and wartime activities would have made them ineligible for standard immigration. Werner von Braun, the lead engineer behind the V-2 rocket that bombed London and Antwerp, was brought to the United States and became the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that took Americans to the moon. The Soviet Union ran parallel programs, extracting German rocket engineers, physicists, and military specialists into their own research institutions. Both superpowers made an explicit decision that the scientific value of these individuals outweighed their crimes, a calculation Argentina was making as well. Argentina also had the social infrastructure to absorb them. Waves of Spanish, Italian, and German immigrants had been arriving in Argentina since the late 19th century, and by 1945 there were large established communities with cultural, linguistic, and in some cases ideological ties to the Axis powers. German social clubs, Italian cultural organizations, and Spanish networks provided ready-made communities where a newly arrived European could disappear into a familiar world without attracting attention. For a former Nazi arriving with a false identity, blending into an existing German-Argentine community was considerably easier than starting from nothing in an unfamiliar country. Of course, getting to Argentina required a network. Fleeing Nazis found sympathizers in several neutral and Axis-aligned countries that provided shelter, paperwork, and passage. Spain under Franco, which had stayed neutral during the war while maintaining close ideological ties with Nazi Germany, became a transit country and safe house. Italy, still home to significant fascist networks even after its own regime collapsed, provided another corridor. In Switzerland, certain banking and administrative channels helped move money and documents. The Catholic Church, specifically certain figures within Vatican networks in Rome, assisted in providing identity documents and referrals, motivated by a combination of anti-communism and personal sympathy. Also, Argentine diplomatic staff and intelligence agents deployed in Europe actively recruited and assisted the most valuable or ideologically connected fugitives. All of this help resulted in two main escape corridors known as Ratlines. The first ran from Germany through Spain and onward by commercial ship to Buenos Aires. The second ran from Germany south through Italy, often through Rome, where Vatican-connected networks provided forged identity documents through the International Red Cross, and then by sea to Argentina. Both routes used commercial passenger ships for the Atlantic crossing, which were legal and largely unmonitored for individual passengers with seemingly valid papers. Of course, staying hidden required systematic identity removal. Most fled under false names using forged or fraudulently obtained passports. Many issued through the Red Cross's emergency document program, which was not designed to verify wartime histories. Before leaving, many liquidated assets, transferred money through Swiss banks, and arranged new financial lives abroad. Properties and possessions in Germany were often abandoned or transferred to family members. In Argentina, many settled in Buenos Aires or in German-speaking communities in the interior, took jobs in industry, agriculture, or the businesses of established German-Argentine networks, and lived outwardly ordinary lives under new identities. Some remained connected to far-right political networks, others simply disappeared into civilian life and were never found. Among those who fled, some names became notorious. Adolf Eichmann, the SS officer who had organized the logistics of the Holocaust, the train schedules, the camp coordination, the paperwork of mass murder, escaped to Argentina under the name Ricardo Clement and lived in Buenos Aires for a decade. Josef Mengele, the Auschwitz physician who conducted sadistic medical experiments on prisoners, reached Argentina via Italy and spent years moving between Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. Erich Priebke, who ordered the massacre of 335 civilians in Rome in 1944, lived openly in the Argentine mountain town of Bariloche for 50 years. Adolf Hitler did not flee. On April 30, 1945, with Soviet forces fighting street by street through Berlin and reaching the Reich Chancellery grounds, Hitler died in his underground bunker. Eva Braun, whom he had married the day before, also died. Their bodies were burned in the garden above, as Hitler had instructed, to prevent the kind of public display the Soviets had made of Mussolini's corpse. The Soviet Union initially concealed what they found, which gave rise to the most persistent conspiracy theory of the 20th century, that Hitler had escaped and was living in Argentina or elsewhere. The Soviets had in fact recovered Hitler's remains and confirmed his death through dental records, but did not make this public until decades later. Independent forensic analysis of teeth held in Russian archives, most recently in 2018, confirmed that they match Hitler's known dental records. Interestingly, finding the Nazis who did flee fell largely to a small number of determined individuals, rather than any organized government effort. The most significant was Simon Wiesenthal, an Austrian Jewish Holocaust survivor who dedicated his post-war life to hunting Nazi war criminals, eventually contributing to the identification and capture of over 1,000 individuals. The most dramatic case was Adolf Eichmann. Israeli intelligence agency Mossad tracked him to Buenos Aires, and in May 1960, a team of agents abducted him from the street near his home, smuggled him out of Argentina under sedation, and brought him to Israel. He was tried publicly in Jerusalem in 1961. The trial was broadcast internationally and became one of the defining moments in public awareness of the Holocaust. He was convicted and executed in 1962. Estimates of the total number of Nazi war criminals who reached Argentina range from several hundred to as many as 9,000. In Argentina today, the period is addressed with more complexity than it once was. For decades, it was largely avoided in public discourse. Perón remained a politically complicated figure whose legacy extended far beyond his wartime sympathies, and the German Argentine communities that had provided cover had become integrated parts of Argentine society. In recent decades, Argentine courts and historians have engaged more directly with the question, and school curricula increasingly include the country's role in sheltering Nazi refugees as part of its 20th century history. The town of Bariloche, where Priebke lived openly for half a century, has grappled publicly with that legacy. The full accounting is still incomplete, and in many cases the passage of time has made it permanently so. Click the video on your screen right now, and I'll explain another everyday mystery you've wondered about your whole life, but never thought to look up.